Today we're going to discuss about the adjustment of status interview. Should you take a lawyer? Should you not take a lawyer? What are the advantages of having the lawyer in the interview? My name is Rahul Reddy. Along with me is my business partner, Rebecca Chen. Rebecca, when did this interview process started? Because it was not there before. Previously, 485 interviews for the employment-based immigration, there was interviews waived only in the cases of criminal activity, very rarely. Otherwise, we used to see the interview. Now, from 2017 onwards, the administration changed their policy for the interview process. So can you explain more about the interview process?
Right. So that was really a requirement of the Trump administration in March 2017. They made a policy stating that all I-485 applications required an in-person interview before the green card could be approved and issued. So that started in 2017. However, what we have seen is that since 2020, ever since the pandemic, USCIS has, in its discretion, been able to waive the in-person interviews for employment-based I-485 applications. And in practice, I think our observation is that out of the employment-based I-485s that are being approved, we would estimate about maybe 20 to 25% are getting requested for an in-person interview. I would say the vast majority of them are, if they're getting approved, they're getting approved without an interview for employment-based.
For sure, if you have any arrest though, even if your criminal lawyer has said that that it's been expunged, you don't have to declare it, you are supposed to disclose that information. If you've been arrested though, for sure, you will get interviewed though. There are some lawyers who mark that people were been convicted for the crime, especially if they have a traffic tickets. Traffic ticket definitely comes under the crime though. But in the page 16 of the I-485 instructions, it's very clear that if it's a traffic ticket though, you do not have to say yes that you have been cited or you have been arrested or you've been you paid any fine though. But some of the lawyers choose to have that one pick yes, and we see them getting interviewed much more. I asked the officers, why are you interviewing when they clearly mentioned it's only a traffic ticket? The officer was telling me that, look, you marked that this person has been cited for or arrested, charged for a crime. You marked yes. When the client that we took marked yes to that question. We don't know if it's only limited to the traffic ticket or if there is any more things that they have done. You only listed the traffic citations. So that's one of the things that we have seen most commonly, people getting interviewed. If you have ever worked for any dubious company that might have any problems with the immigration, either the company has done some fraudulent activity, there is a good chance that you'll be interviewed though. Also, if you have ever been to Silicon Valley University, we have also said Tri-Valley University, NPU and ITU, these are the other universities that we noticed that if you have gone to any of these universities, we have seen those people getting interviewed though. If you have any of these problems other than the traffic problem, definitely you should take a lawyer. If you don't though, you can either have a mock interview with an immigration lawyer to go through the things to see if they can identify some of the problems, or maybe just take a lawyer with you. Now, there are a lot of rumors that if you take a lawyer, it's a negative thing. Is it a negative thing in taking a lawyer?
No, you have a right at the I-485 interview to have an attorney present with you. Some people do ask us, does it prejudice the USCIS officer if they see you coming in with an attorney? Do they think there's something you have to hide or something that you have to be worried about? In our experience, that is not the case. It does not prejudice the USCIS officer. You have a right to have an attorney there. Even if your case is entirely straightforward, you don't have any criminal record or any immigration status violations in your past, you can have an attorney there, and it should not affect the outcome of your interview or application.
Rebecca, when you go to the adjustment of status interview when the officer is asking the question to the candidate, will you answer or candidate will answer.
Yeah, so the role of the attorney in the actual interview with the USCIS officer is somewhat limited. So any questions of fact that the officer asks, those have to be answered by the applicant. So the attorney cannot answer on behalf of their client all the questions of the officer. So anything that the officer asks that's a factual question that's directed to the applicant does need to answer that personally. What the attorney can do in the interview, though, is to clarify for the officer if there are any legal issues that arise from those factual statements. So one example might be that if the applicant had in their past at some point some period of unlawful presence, if it was less than 180 days, we know that that does not, it's not fatal to the I-485 application. It can still be approved, but there is a question on the I-485 form that asks whether the applicant has ever had any unlawful presence. So if the if the applicant was truthful and they answered yes, the officer will likely during the interview ask them again, maybe just to confirm, what date did you end up departing from the US? What date was this application maybe denied that started the unlawful presence? So those factual questions have to be answered by the applicant, but the attorney can then clarify to the officer that that period is less than 180 days and under the immigration provision,
245K.
right, in this case 245K, that excuses employment-based I-485 applicants from 180 days or less of unlawful presence. So that can be the role of the attorney, clarifying to the officer that that unlawful presence should not result in a denial of the application.
And also in cases where people have violated the status, but they have the I-94, it's called out of status though. The USCIS should only look into the status violations from the time they last entered into the United States, not before that. Let's say, for example, if there is any F1 violations, but you left the country, got the H1B and came back, they should not look into the F1 violations. They should only look into the violations that after you enter into the United States. So these things can be clarified by a lawyer, can be described by the lawyer. There are some minor corrections in there. For example, you may not have listed some information correctly. The lawyer normally, requests the officer, look, there are some corrections that need to be made, so that the officer doesn't look at you badly because you have misinformed them. And normally, when I go for the interview, I raise my hand to the officer, and the officer said, "Why are you raising a hand?" Then I tell them, look, there are some corrections that need to be made, the clerical corrections that when the 485 has been filed, they have not listed it. So the officer will thank you for mentioning it, and I'll take a look into it. So when you give this kind of information in advance, though, the officers are more happier rather than asking the questions later on. There's one time in an interview, the officer asked, "Have you ever been arrested or charged?" And my client said no. And the officer asked, "Have you ever been arrested or charged?" Loudly, a little bit more louder. And I asked the officer, look, I want to discuss with my client before he answered the question. The officer left the room, and then I asked the client, "Hey, what happened?" And he could only recollect that one thing, I got shot in the leg they tried to rob my motor. And I said, that doesn't look like you've been any dealing. And then I called the officer, and then we told the incident. He said, that's not the issue, that's fine. Then he asked, have you ever been arrested or charged with any crime? Again, he asked. I said, officer, look, excuse me, I want to speak with my client. And then I asked, is there any other incident? And this guy is a motel owner. He told that, yeah, I remember one time the police called me. Why did the police call me to the police station? Because I refused to pay the telephone bill. Why did you refuse to pay the telephone bill? He said, because there were some 900 numbers. Back in those days, there were some bad numbers, and they were blocked, but they were actually not blocked, and they want him to pay $2,000, and he refused to pay. And there was a criminal case that was filed against him because it was a theft of services. And this guy, the police officer, asked, hey, would you pay or should I charge you for the crime? This guy just paid the check for $2,000 and came back. That is considered as crime charge. We didn't know about it, but then when the officer came in, then we explained all the things. things got better. There are things that lawyers can resolve the things. If you have a lawyer in the interview that can do better. Not in all the cases, though. I would say that there are some cases that can be resolved much better. Rebecca, what if the lawyer is in Texas and my interview is in California? Can a Texas lawyer go to California for the interview?
Yeah, definitely. So immigration law is federal law, so it's national. So the attorney who is representing you at the I-485 interview, as long as they are licensed in the state where they practice, they can represent you even if the interview is taking place in a different state.
My company's lawyer is with ABC Company, though. And can I hire, because I don't want to disclose all the information to my company lawyer, can I take my own lawyer to the interview, even though that lawyer did not represent me or my company in filing the 485 application?
Yeah, definitely. So the I-485 application, unlike the I-140 or the H-1B or any other employment-based work visa, the I-485 is not company sponsored technically. They may still need to support it to some extent by signing the J supplement back when you filed the application. But the I-485 application is in the name of the applicant. So it's in your name. So you do have the right to bring an attorney of your choosing to the interview with you, even if it's the attorney who did not, an attorney that wasn't the attorney who filed the I-485 for you. A different attorney can come to the interview with you. They just need to bring a G-28 form that you have signed, and you just give it to the officer right there at the interview to show that you have authorization to represent that client.
The commonly asked problems what we see with the clients, and which is not actually a problem, but my position has changed. So will that be any problem though? Well, you need to be very careful in the language that you're using though. When you're saying position has changed, it means that you moved from software profession to a lawyer like me. If the answer is no, then you should say that my position has elaborated a little bit more than what was prescribed in the labor certification. If your salary has increased, that's not a big issue because your labor certification was filed maybe 10 years ago, maybe 7 years ago. It's okay for the salary to change though. If it's a geographical location change, especially for a consulting companies, that's fine because most of the description what is given in there is that you will be able to move from one area to another area in the labor certification that's prescribed, especially if it's an end client. I mean the company, the permanent company though. Even though the company is located in California, the labor certification clearly says that it's only for California. You're still working in Florida. As long as the job offer is there, it still is not a problem. You may want to discuss with your lawyer, you may want to discuss with the HR to make sure everybody is on the same page. They do go over the 485 application questions. Have you ever been arrested? Have you ever been deported? Have you ever been committed any crimes? Have you helped anybody to illegally immigrate to the United States? These are the normal questions that they go through. I normally tell people to read the 485 form just before they go in to make sure that if there is any, you'll be a little bit more comfortable. And believe me, at the 485 interview time, you will be tensed. The reason I can tell is I have gone through the interview myself. Before I went through the interview, I went through as a lawyer on an EAD application. On an EAD, I was an immigration lawyer. I went through many interviews and I was fine. I was joyful. I was speaking with the officers. I was fine. But when the time came for my own interview, believe me, I was scared as. So it is. I mean, if you don't get a sleep a night before, that's natural. Nothing to worry about it. It happens with most of the people. Not to worry about it at all, but make sure you go through the 485 form, and if there is any discrepancies though, you will be given a chance to correct. And if there is a major discrepancies though, I normally tell people that as soon as you take the oath, raise your hand. If you raise your hand and don't put the hand down, the officer will ask you why are you raising a hand. You tell that I want to make some corrections though. Always ask the permission of the officer before you speak. Now, when the officer is asking the question, you can answer, but if you want to volunteer an information much more than what the officer is asking, or if you want to interrupt the officer in any of the thing, always raise the hand. And the officer will know to stop what the officer is doing and ask you why you raise the hand. That's the time when you can correct. Let's say, for example, your date of birth is wrong or your parent name is wrong. Those are the things that can be corrected. Now, if you have moved the address, you don't have to raise the hand because the officer will ask you, are you living at this address? At that time, you can say that, no, I've changed my address, and you can give the new address. And when you do any of these corrections, so the officer will make you sign there that particular spot that you've changed the address. You just have to initial it and date it at that location. Anything else, Rebecca?
So for the documents that we usually recommend that applicants bring with them to the interview, so they should be things that you already have copies of, your original passports, not copies, but including expired passports that you may have used in the past on entries to the US, all your I-797 approval notices that you've had, your original birth certificate, your original marriage certificate, your children's original birth certificate if they are going with you, tax returns for at least the past 3 years up to maybe 5 years, W-2s for that same period of time, any other original immigration documents you've had throughout your immigration history, I-20 forms, EAD cards, even if they're no longer valid, just bring them with you. Copies of your most recent pay statements, and then a recently dated employment verification letter if your application is based on an I-140, a recently dated letter from the I-140 petitioner confirming that the job offer is still being offered to you by that company.
We're going to list the documents list at the bottom of we're going to list in this video, and they're also called living together documents, especially if you're married and you're taking your spouse and you're taking the child, though they're going to look into relationship between the wife and husband and the children. So I will list up the documents though, but you don't have to take all the documents on the living together. Whatever you can take, you should take. As far as the list what Rebecca has given with regards to the employment, please take all those things. But list of living together documents, just take about 5 or 6 of them. That'll be more than enough, because in the employment base, they normally don't doubt the marriages. You've already been married for a lot of years, and she is already on H4 or H1 or whichever visa it might be. You're already living together, so that's not going to be much. But we'll give a list of the documents though, and all those things will be provided at the bottom of this this video. We'll provide the list of all the documents. A lot of people ask, can I take this document? Can I take that document? Can I take this one? If you have any doubt whether you should take the document, take it. Don't even worry about it. Make sure that you have everything in an index format though, where you can pull it out. I normally keep it in A to Z thing and put a list of the thing. Passport in this one, I need my H1Bs on this one. I'll put it for my wife separately, and take it along with me. And it'll be easier when the officer is asking the information for you to provide. Look into the index. Oh, they're asking for my marriage certificate. There you go. Here is a marriage certificate. Now, with regards to the living together documents, try to make extra copy, because they will for sure take it. As regards to the income tax returns and the W-2 forms, they may or may not take it though, but with regards to the living together documents, they'll take a copy of it. Any other information?
No.
Even if you intend not to take a lawyer, it probably is worth for you to have a mock interview done by an immigration lawyer to go through your 485 documents and see if there is anything that is popping out. Especially look into your history, if any of the universities, any of the employment, any of the violations. Please go through all those things with the immigration lawyer so that you can evaluate better and answer better when you go for the interview. Thank you for tuning in.